Alright, so Chris Summers has released this Substack on the CB case. I'm gonna link it in the description, and you guys know what time it is. It is trial breakdown time. In this trial, CB actually gets into the witness box and is questioned by his barrister, who goes by the name James Scobie. This is what he looks like, and James Scobie also had a news article written about him in 2017 when he helped trap star Toxic from Church Road beat his case. Well, I mean, obviously, not really beat the case because he didn't do it. Just helped him defend himself against 2 counts of attempted murder and possession of a firearm. And he was featured in Toxic's music video. And the prosecutor in this case, Anthony Orchard, who himself has actually found himself in some controversy. Well, in 2021, it says they were facing a £400,000 legal bill in a court battle with their pensioner neighbor who was suing them for a £2,200 over-inch wide water stain on the ceiling. Just pettiness, you know? We're not sure what happened here, but yeah. He was the prosecutor in CB's 4-week trial. But remember, guys, this murder took place 7 years ago from the point that CB was arrested. And the case was only reopened because the police had new technology that allowed them to find DNA evidence on the victim's left palm hand. It was a sample of DNA that was collected from his palm on his left hand. And CB's defense for his DNA being found on the victim's hand is that when he used to shoot music videos, he never used to own the balaclava. The cameraman would provide the balaclava. We're gonna go through everything that we know in this video, guys, so give it a like. Let's get that out of the way. Now, CB is a drill rapper who has been rapping since 2017, and he blew up in 2019 with his hit song Take That Risk. And because of an incident that took place in 2018, in 2019 he was jailed for 23 years for pointing a gun at police officers while wearing a clown mask. They were going on a ride out to a rival gang territory in Leytonstone. They were riding in a stolen BMW and the police spotted it and chased it. 4 of them ended up getting caught, but it is rumored that there were 5 of them in the car and the driver got away. And to this day, they don't know who the driver is. They were never able to catch the driver. When he was sentenced to 23 years, the judge told all of the defendants, "You are all comparatively young men. However, over a long period, you had been attracted by and engaged in an urban culture that embraced violence and blights communities." And it has actually been revealed that CB was due for a parole hearing in 2031. So if CB was not convicted of this murder, he could have been released in 6 years' time. But now, after I read you guys what happened in this trial, it's looking like he's going to get another 30 to 40 years, because you guys have seen what happened with Billy Billions, with KO. They received crazy sentences. And in Billy Billions' case, the police fabricated evidence. They didn't find a gun, yet he was still given a 39-year sentence. The police are not, I mean, the judge, the system is not playing with gang violence these days. And especially if you're a drill rapper, it can and will be used against you in court, as you're going to hear right now. So the story goes as this. Grinner, who had just bought a cigarette lighter for 60p, was walking back to his home in nearby Coolfin Road, up an alley next to the shop, when he saw his assailants emerge from a car, at least one of them carrying a large knife or machete. So this is Coolfin Road, and they say that Grinner was walking here when CB and his co-defendant jumped out of a car. He can be seen on camera running back into the shop, and seconds later, the killer, wearing dark clothing and a balaclava, follows him in and starts slashing at him. Grinner hides behind a row of groceries in the tiny shop and starts throwing random products, including tins of baked beans at his attacker, as he desperately tries to ward him off. Cornered, Grinner is pushed to the floor in BJ Wines and suffers the fatal stab wound as the horrified shopkeeper watches on. The stature of the killer fitted CB, as did his notoriety locally as one of the leading lights in the Northside Newham gang, an alliance of 3 groups: Woodgrange, Chad Green, and Stratford. 7th CGE E15. Grinner was a key player in the Custom House gang, which with its affiliates in the next door Beckton made up Southside Newham. The police arrested CB only 2 days after Grinner's murder, and when he was arrested, they found 114 wraps of Class A drugs on him at the time. But when they interviewed him, he gave a no-comment interview, and they didn't have enough evidence to charge him. This is back in 2017. But the prosecutor, Anthony Orchard, told the jury at the Old Bailey that changed in 2024 after a forensic review, when items were submitted for further testing. A wet and dry swab of the palm side of Ahmed Dean Jar, also known as Grinner's left hand, was one such item. CB's DNA was found in the sample. He explained to the jury that 2 propositions were concerned. Either the DNA from Grinner and CB and 2 other individuals was present, or the DNA from Grinner and 3 other individuals was present, but none of the DNA originated from CB. CB, it is estimated that the DNA findings are at least 27 million times more likely to be obtained if the first rather than the second proposition were true. So Anthony's basically saying, hey, with these findings from our DNA evidence, it is 27 million times more likely that Grinner's DNA, your DNA, and two other people's DNA is present than Grinner's DNA and 3 other people that aren't used DNA being present. It just sounds confusing explaining that when it doesn't need to be. It's not. But CB's barrister, James Scobie, was highly skeptical of this DNA, which was suddenly found 7 years later, which is fair, you know, suddenly found 7 years later. What new technology? How have you guys done this? That's what I'd be asking if I was CB's lawyer. But James was unable to convince the jury there was an innocent explanation. When James asked CB about it during his evidence in chief, CB came up with a technically plausible but highly unlikely scenario to explain why his DNA was on the hand of a dead man. But first, James laid the ground with the jury. In the witness box, CB said he often wore balaclavas when filming music videos, which were shot to accompany his drill music. James said, "Did you have your own balaclava?" "No," CB said. "Where did they come from?" "My cameraman. My main cameraman would bring them as props, balaclavas and face coverings. If I was going to make a video, I'd have my face covered. We all would," he replied. "Why?" James asked. "So there are 2 reasons. 1 is not to be identified by rival gang members, and 2 is not to be identified as gang members by the police," replied CB. An example which was to come up later was the video for Armed and Ready, which was filmed on the 22nd of March 2017, 11 days before Grinner was killed. Well, they say the video was filmed on the 22nd of March 2017. That's not true because it was uploaded on the 22nd of March 2017. It's still up on Link Up TV.
No face, no case, no Evie. Trying to put use on tellies.
And that no face, no case, no Evie is also used in the trial. But the next day, CB's solicitor resumed questioning of CB. And from the way Chris Summers is describing it, it seems like he was relieved that his solicitor finally got to the point. When he said to CB, "You have seen the grim footage on DNA and you've heard about secondary transfer of DNA. Is that something you have been thinking about?" "Yes," replied CB. "Can you say how your DNA was found where it was found?" "I can't," he replied. CB's solicitor said, "What do you think it could be? How do you think your DNA could have been transferred to him? What do you suggest is a possibility? It could be gloves or balaclava. Gloves are probably less likely. Gloves are shared but less than balaclavas," said CB. "How are they distributed?" said his solicitor. "The cameraman would bring them," he replied. So it was basically being suggested to the jury that Grinner's real killer was another member of the Northside Newham gang who had worn a balaclava that CB had previously worn during a drill music video shoot, and that somehow his DNA had transferred from that balaclava onto the hand of a dead man. Mental. CB's lawyer also asked CB about a contact in his phone which was called Auntie Viola. CB explained that it was actually a woman he was sleeping with and he therefore needed to hide her number from his girlfriend Charmaine. His lawyer asked him, "Were you seeing her much?" CB says, "I think so. I can't remember who it was," he replied nonchalantly. His lawyer asked him, "Do you actually have an Auntie Viola?" And CB said no. But his lawyer ended the questioning by asking him, "Do you know who did it?" "No," said CB. "Were you there at the time of the killing?" "No," said CB. And finally, he asked, "Is that the truth?" And CB said yes. Then it was time for Anthony Orchard, the prosecutor, to question CB. And he started off by asking him about his detention by the police on the 4th of April 2017, when he was told he had been arrested on suspicion of Grinner's murder. The prosecutor said, "You made no comment." CB replied, "Correct." The prosecutor said, "You knew you were on the road with your good friend Cater that night." CB says no. The prosecutor says, "You chose no explanation because you didn't have a good one to give." CB said no. "I was acting on legal advice to make no comment." The prosecutor said, "The attacker wanted to make sure they couldn't be identified, didn't they?" "Yes," replied CB. "We heard that the main attacker was a 6'1" man." "Yes," replied CB. "The second man was 5'7". "Yes," replied CB. "You're 6'1", aren't you?" "Yes," replied CB. "Your friend Cater is 5'7", said the prosecutor. "I believe so," replied CB. "Would agree that the witness who saw all that happened said that they saw 2 people and mentioned a notable height difference." "Yes," replied CB. "Both of your DNA was found there and both heights fit you? Yes, replied CB. Cater's DNA, his co-defendant, was found on a knife cover, a knife sheath, which was left at the crime scene. The prosecutor then took CB through his gang life. CB said he joined the Wood Grange gang when he was about 13 or 14, and by 2016, when he was 18, he was selling drugs for them, including as part of County Line's team operating in the Suffolk town of Bury St. Edmunds. I've never heard of Bury St. Edmunds. 1 second, my people. Bro, this is, man said, Colchester, Ipswich, Norwich. I ain't never heard of this place, you know, but I've driven to Norwich before. My uncle took me to a football match. Well, not a football match, a Tottenham game in Norwich years ago. Like when I was a kid, bro. I'm talking like I was like 8 years old or something. So we must have driven around these sides. Let's see. Yeah, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb in a place like this, mate. There's a nice church there, but back to it. CB said that his role was to transport the drugs from London to that town that I just showed you guys, stay inside the trap house, and to manage the money and make sure it got back to the gang in the capital, London City. CB said because he was black and it was a very white area, he could not risk going out and dealing and had to delegate that task to local drug users and addicts who would get their drugs free or heavily discounted. The prosecutor questioned him about how he would enforce such discipline and make sure drugs weren't stolen in the small town I just showed you guys. CB's replies were quite ridiculous and ignored his fearsome reputation. And yeah, CB was a feared guy, bro. CB had a reputation, all right? He did. What would you say to people who lost drugs? CB said, I'd be annoyed. I'd probably shout at them. The prosecutor asked him about his street name, CB, or Cracky Blacks. The prosecutor said it related to him dealing crack cocaine. That would be wrong, replied CB. The prosecutor then went on to ask him about his brief career in drill music. It was brief, but it was very impactful. Drill music is all about violence. Yes, replied CB. Now, but one of the most, respected drill rappers in the drill scene in open court has just said, yes, drill music is all about violence. Gangs? Not always, replied CB. Gang violence? Yes, he replied. Gang tensions? Yes, he said. What happens within these territories? Yes, he confirmed. It can be about control of an area. Yes, he replied. Warnings to other gangs to keep out. Yes, replied CB. The prosecutor then asked him about the lyric of the track Armed and Ready. And we heard that earlier. I played it to you earlier. No face, no case, no Evie. The prosecutor asked him what the lyric meant. He said that means that if you can't see the person's face, they won't get arrested easily. The prosecutor said these are the sort of things being sung about in drill songs. Yes, replied CB. The prosecutor asked him how many people would appear in a drill music video. It varies from 10 to 30, said CB. Mr. Orchard, the prosecutor, referring to the statement of an expert witness, said, it's often delivered in uncompromising and offensive language. Yes, he replied. Why so violent? That's when CB replied, saying drill music is violence. That's what sells. The more graphic, the more gory, the more disrespectful, the more it sells. The prosecutor said, it's all about what you have done in order to build credibility and authenticity. Yes, replied CB. Is that what you were trying to do? Yes, replied CB. If you kill someone, that would improve your status as well. Within drill music, yes, replied CB. The prosecutor then asked him about diss tracks aimed at rival gangs. CB said sometimes videos would be just shared between friends, but he said normally it's publicized. Why? Asked the prosecutor. Because that's what the followers of drill music want to hear. The prosecutor then asked him about his Twitter profile, Still Woody CB. Here's CB's Twitter. That's still up. They say that he used his Twitter to promote drill music and the 7th gang. Well, they call it the Wood Grange gang. The prosecutor then again, quoting the expert witness, asked CB, diss tracks are common, referencing mocking rivals, killing rivals, shooting, stabbings. Yes, every time, replied CB. Prosecutor said the expert witness assessed CB's videos as showing animosity towards the Custom House gang. And CB said yes, that had been going on for a long time. Yes, replied CB. The prosecutor then asked him what was meant by the scoreboard. That is the count between gangs on both sides, he replied. The prosecutor asked if Custom House gang had managed to stab a Wood Grange gang member, that would go on the scoreboard. Yes, replied CB. Does it have points? At this point, the jurors might have wondered if there was going to be some complex scoring system like in rugby. But CB said that this was not the case, and he said a stabbing would be a point, a shooting, a murder, obviously. What about a ride out where nothing happens? No, replied CB. who confirmed that would be pointless. So the scoreboard refers to acts of violence. Yes, he replied. The prosecutor then asked him, what is the reason for a ride out? To look for an opposing gang member, replied CB. If your gang succeeds, what does it mean for your gang? Asked Mr. Orchard. Is it something that will get sung about? Yes, he replied. The prosecutor then subtly changed direction, and a slightly discombobulated CB did not see what was coming. When you go on a ride out, you need someone in the car who knows what the other gang members look like. Yes, he replied. Then the prosecutor landed his punch. It just happens that you knew what Mr. Jar Grinner looked like. Yes, CB replied, without hesitation or cognition. The prosecutor then asked him about what sort of weapons would be taken on a ride out and what would happen to the stolen or cloned car that was used. Burned, he replied. Why? To get rid of the evidence, he replied. The car in the Grinner ride-out was found burnt out in Epping Forest on the night of the murder. The prosecutor went on. If a ride-out is successful, does that mean the Wood Grange gang is successful? Yes, he replied. Would the people involved in a ride-out trust each other? Yes, he replied. Why? Because they know they potentially can get arrested. The prosecutor then asked him about a message on his phone from one of the other Northside Newham gang members about the murder of Grinner, and asked, when you were asked about it, you wouldn't have told him if you'd been involved, would you? I didn't know, replied CB. In 2017, how many members of the Wood Grange gang were there? Hey, my people, Chung Lee asks if you could give this video a like, because Chung Lee says this was a painful one. Like, these guys, it's better if they're off the streets. I don't know what the hell these people are doing. I hear where you're coming from, Chung Lee, but if you could give the video a like, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Cheers. I didn't necessarily know everyone. I couldn't say. Up to 20, I'd say, he replied. The prosecutor asked him about a number of other gang members, including Shortbread, Whoosh, and Slug. Now, for those of you guys that don't know Whoosh, and for God's sake, I forgot to make my face bigger. Whoosh is a drill rapper who went ghost a while back. He made quite a lot of music, made songs with Lowski, etc. But now he doesn't really rap. But here they bring up something called Operation Glen Falls, where in 2017, an employee at this company called Capita, who won a £400 million tagging contract from the UK government in 2014, they were paid £400 million to deal with people's tag up until 2020. It's crazy how everything is just privatized nowadays. Like, seriously? You lot have to contract out the tag people? Well, this guy was sentenced to 7 years. He's probably home now. He was sentenced to 7 years for apparently taking £500 off of criminals to fiddle with their tags so they could go and, you know, so they wouldn't be monitored. They say that he said that his toolkit was stolen, received a new toolkit, and was used his other toolkit that he said was stolen to, you know, deal with this. But I think what they're trying to do is say, hey, this is why your location doesn't tie you to being at the murder scene, because the prosecutor asked CB about his whereabouts on the day of Grinner's murder, but CB claimed he was at home at the Chapel Point area in Forest Gate. This is the Chapel Point area of Forest Gate. I'm sure I've driven down that road quite a few times. I'm sure that takes you, let me even go here. Yeah, I've driven down there bare time. He said that the fact there was no activity on his phone at the time of the murder was because he was probably gaming or watching television with his girlfriend Charmaine. The prosecutor then asked him about the events after the shooting, including 2 shootings which were believed to be in retaliation for Grinner's death. They say that hours after Grinner was stabbed to death, his associates from Southside Newham drove north and shot at 2 men they believe were affiliated with Northside Newham. They say at 10:50 p.m. on the same day Grinner was shot, a guy called AK, real name Nathan Ade Kuda, was shot in the stomach here in Clare Gardens, Forest Gate. And they say half an hour before that, somebody called Abdiasis Jamale was shot in Stratford. Both of them survived, and at the time there was very little media coverage of this explosive bout of violence in East London. Yeah, the media wasn't really covering the war in Newham like that, bro, but it was cracking, it was going off. The prosecutor, Anthony Orchard, asked CB if he had contacted AK after he'd been shot. CB said no, but it emerged that the following day, the 3 factions of the Northside Newham gang, Northside Newham, met up in the Olympic Park in Stratford to discuss what happened. And this is the Olympic Park, Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. And yeah, it looks much better now. I remember back in 2012, or maybe 2013, just after the Olympics happened, I was at this dead play scheme, and they said, oh, we're going to the Olympic Park. And I thought we were actually going to tour the Olympic Stadium, but no, they took us just to quit the park. Like, the park, bro. The Olympic Park. I couldn't believe it, bro. I was pissed off. But CB said when they linked up, there was talk of retribution. And at this point, the judge intervened and asked his own questions. He said, was retribution something that you were interested in? And CB said no. And Chris Summers says, arguably, although this was not, pointed out to the jury, CB knew that the 2 shootings by Southside and Newham were retaliation for the murder he had carried out and had just evened the score, making there no need for there to be any retribution. So they got him. They're talking about scoreboard, all of this. They made him define what you mean by score. So it's like, cool, you killed a Southside member, and on the same day, 2 Northside members got shot, so the score's even, innit? The prosecutor then asked CB why searches of his computer showed he has visited a GoFundMe page set up by relatives of Grinner. And CB said it's because Grinner was a main member of the Custom House gang, so I wanted to know what happened and I was researching everything. And finally, it was CB's lawyer's turn to question CB again. I'm sure CB was relieved because this prosecutor was not going easy, bro. James Scobie asked CB whether he thought one of the eyewitnesses' descriptions fitted him. One of the eyewitnesses described the killer as being a mixed race man between the age of 20 and 30. And he said, no, it doesn't. CB is dark skinned and was 19 at the time. CB then interjected himself in an awkward way, saying there was a witness who saw the attacker without his balaclava, and I was just glad that he said his complexion was caramel. CB's lawyer then asked him a couple of other questions about the Armed and Ready video. CB said it was filmed in late March 2017, somewhere in Forest Gate. His lawyer asked who filmed it, and when asked who filmed it, he said Mayo TV, you know, yeah, you guys know him, Mayowa. CB's lawyer then concluded his re-examination by asking CB, at any point during this trial, have you tried to paint a false picture of yourself or the people you are with? No, said CB. On the 26th of April 2020, David Golmo, an NHS worker, was killed. And then exactly a year later, the same day in 2021, Grinner, the person who's just getting justice now, his younger brother was killed. And rapper S13 and TT, they were sentenced to 36 years and 31 years for his murder. And they say that after his sentencing, if you guys remember this crazy fight that went on in Southend, this crazy knife fight, yeah? Look at this, bro. Fucking hell. Look at this, bro. In Southend, you see, I'll tell you guys this, bro. I remember there was a time back in 2022 when I had to lay low for a bit, yeah? I was laying low in Southend. I told my cousin I'm chilling in Southend, bro. I'm just baking off, going to this seaside thing. There's like a fun fair thing there, bro. I'm baking off. And my cousin's from East, and my cousin tells me, Tankz, get the fuck out of Southend. What the fuck you doing? I'm like, what? He's like, bro, nigga, do you know how many people from everywhere are up in Southend doing you know what? I got the fuck out of Southend after that. But Southend is not a bakey place. It's not a bakey place, bro. If you're from London, especially if you're from London, Southend is not a bakey place, bro. But this was all going on. Just mental. Apparently it started and then it ended. Well, 10 were sentenced for that a few months back. All these man were sentenced. Some of them, he looks young, bro. Yeah, they're young, bro. 19, 18, 19, 18. They're all young. Them getting arrested.
Show me your hands now. Show me your hands. Get on your knees. Everyone get on your knees. Everyone down your knees. Okay. All the way down to your stomachs. All the way down. All the way down. Arms to the side. Yeah.
We've got the man that's been stabbed. He's got a large stab wound to his back.
Yeah, they're kids, bro. Come on, this is foolishness, bro. You're really going out there, you do a madness like that, and you're still in the vicinity. Kid shit. But they're saying that the ACG lot found out that there was going to be some Northside lot in Southend. So it says them man arrived heavily armed and marched to Southend's Prittlewell station on the 30th of July 2024. They marched down the high street in an intimidating large group and encountered their enemies outside of the bank. One member of each gang suffered serious injuries in the first clash, and it says there were more than one clash on that sunny summer's day. Absolutely mental. But in the trial, they take us back to 2024 where CB was arrested, and this is the footage of what happened in the shop.
Yes.
Messed up.
Everything's suspicion. Okay, when I arrest you, I'll read the date out to you in a second.
So this is his co-defendant being arrested, and then if we skip to CB, here's CB being arrested.
I'm arresting you for the murder of Ahmed Danger.
And he's already serving 23 years. He's already well, he was due to be released. He was going to have an opportunity to be released in 2031, but he's obviously been rearrested while he's already in the system.
On the 2nd of April 2017 on Freemasons Road. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do so may be given in evidence. The grounds for your arrest are for a prompt and effective investigation by means of taped interview at a police custody.
So what's going on now? You're going to go to a custody facility where you'll be interviewed. You'll come back here.
The time of your arrest is 9:03.
Looks like 9:06, bro. At that point, like, look at him. What do you do? What do you do, fam? Like, yeah. This was on the 25th of October in 2024. When he was arrested and interviewed, he gave no comment. But when it came to the trial, he had a lot to say for himself. His co-defendant, who was also known as SK, chose not to give evidence in the witness box, but it made no difference in the end, as both CB and SK were convicted. They were found guilty of Grinner's murder. Superintendent Kelly Allen, who led the investigation, said 8 years on from Ahmed's vicious murder, today his family finally have the justice they deserve. CB and Qatar and SK have spent years thinking they have got away with murdering Ahmed, a man who they had never met and didn't know. They drove out to Customer House and attacked Ahmed, who was simply going to the shops. Despite damning forensics evidence against them, they have refused to acknowledge their actions, which has put Ahmed's family through a painful trial. As CB was taken back to prison after the guilty verdict on Thursday, I understand someone in the public gallery shouted, "Love you, love you, love you." CB, who had been due for parole for his previous offense at the earliest in November 2031, and Qatar, who will be sentenced on the 24th of October, but both face a mandatory life sentence. If someone asked me to guess, Chris Summers, a crime journalist, has been doing this for as long as I've been alive, what the minimum tariff CB will get, I would guess that it would be somewhere between 35 and 40 years. That is everything. Yeah. Goes without saying, this life is shit. If you're on this trajectory, if you think anything has happened to you that is worth you stabbing someone over, I urge you to reevaluate your life choices, because when it comes to this gang beef, you know, what I always think about is, what is there that could happen that I would think I need to kill someone for? If you touched a female family member of mine or something along those lines, you know, that's the only explanation I can really think of. That's the only reason I can really think that someone could give me where I would hear where they're coming from. But you want to kill these guys because they're affiliated with other guys, and then when you actually get down to the first cause, it's because these are just emotional man children who aren't able to have conversations. Because I'm sure whatever started all of this violence could have just been solved with a simple conversation. But no, egos get in the way, and yeah. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace and love to every single one of you guys watching. Thank you.